Hi, thanks for everything I've learned from each of you. It's great. My question is, can you share some strategies or stories about ways to help young autistic girls find autistic pride? I work with young girls who unfortunately say things like, I hate autism, or don't want to be called autistic, they have this internalized struggle coming to terms with that. And I have a daughter who's autistic as well, so I would like strategies as a mother as well as somebody who's working with young girls.
I would say find your daughter and these other young girls mentors who are adult autistics like us, who are happy and accepting of our autistic identities. Introduce them to autistic culture. As Vivian was saying, we have our own culture. We have autistic culture. Find them autistic role models. There aren't a lot of female autistic role models other than Temple Grandin. However, she's a very successful autistic person. Just say, look, this person is autistic. Even some historical figures like Einstein and Tesla and Graham Gould, Glenn Gould, they weren't necessarily diagnosed, but you can say this person has similar traits to you, and look at how successful they are, look at how smart they are, and also just when tell them you're proud of them. Like I was hearing how, being in the choir, this is their first experience of someone being proud of them, someone being happy for them, and just. And I would also recommend, there is a blog called A Diary of a Mom. It is a mom who is sharing about raising her autistic daughter with her daughter's express permission, no privacy violations. I like to emphasize that. And this daughter, who is 14, will happily say, I like being autistic. And I think it's just really important for autistic kids to hear, I like being autistic.
I was gonna say similar thing, but also kind of the opposite thing. If somebody's kind of struggling to accept a diagnosis, I think one of the most important things is to just assure them that life goes on. Like obviously surround them with role models who are going through similar things, but just really push them to find something that they're passionate about, and don't make it about autism. Just be like, yo, it really literally doesn't matter. If you never want to hear the word autism again, you pretty much don't really have to, as long as you always push yourself and don't ever use it as an excuse. You can ask for more time to do stuff, but you can't really just be like, this is all I'm ever going to be, and this is all my life is kind of worth, because there's kids who go on to do really cool things that have really nothing to do with it. And so just assure them that they're still expected to perform well and do stuff.
I have a comment on role models. Please do provide as many good role models, examples as possible. Introduce them in person. There's also a lot of writings online, a lot of resources online. The autistic community is very vibrant online. So if you're saying, well, where are those autistic role models? They're probably online. Another thing about role models is to show, say, Temple Grandin, Einstein, and so on, show their struggles, because there's a lot of pressure if we say, look, there's an autistic person, look, they're succeeding, and that can invalidate the difficulties that this person is going through, your child or another autistic friend, So show all the dimensions so that there is success, but recognize the difficulties as well. And get in touch with your local autistic community, or even start one of your own, because there is space to be held, right? And making those spaces possible is so important. That's all I have.
Did you want to say something, or you want to do the next question?
Sure. When you're working with the label of autism, and they don't want that or don't want to accept that, try breaking it down into smaller pieces. Like, you have trouble reading, so let's do this to help you out, instead of just saying you're autistic, so you have trouble reading. Just remove the autism label. I found that really helped when I worked with younger children in daycare. They didn't want to hear about this autism thing. Well, when you say, okay, you're having trouble sitting still, so let's do this, instead of saying you're autistic, so let's do this. I found that helped.
Question to all of you is, you've all been through the public school system. If you had one thing to say to teachers or the people that have taught you, what would that be? What could they do, one thing that they could do to make it better for you to have gone through the school system?
Don't let people choose their own teams and their own partners. Don't say, okay, everybody, choose a partner and do this, because then your autistic kid, your neurodivergent kid, your disabled kid is going to be the last one chosen, or is going to be left without a partner. And for bleep's sake, do something about bullying. Don't just say you're doing something, because I was bullied for my entire elementary school career, and it wasn't until my older brother was asked to be my school basketball coach that he said, I will not be your school basketball coach unless you make these kids stop picking on my baby sister, that they finally did something about it. And they proved they were able to do something about it. They just never bothered to do it before.
I would say two things. The first one's not really related to bullying, is to make sure whatever you do, do not put a kid on an IEP that will prevent them from graduating with a dogwood without trying everything, and don't let behavior when they're in middle school age or elementary or even and the other one is, sometimes I've noticed that when I'm teaching choir, sometimes somebody will do something that is a little bit unexpected and everything kind of stops, and there's that moment when their peers are trying to decide whether to judge them on that. There's always that little moment of surprise. I really like to take advantage of that and kind of either laugh about it in a nice way and kind of justify what they've done, and show their peers that it's okay to find humor in it, and that it's okay to just really pretty much justify that what they've done is okay, and to seek those moments out and to take advantage of them.
So I have two pieces of advice for the other question, the previous question. To focus on universal design rather than specifically focusing on the neurodivergent student in your classroom. Like we've already talked about, a lot of girls are not diagnosed, they're missed. So if you make your classroom autistic friendly you don't have to say it's autistic friendly, but if you create the environment so that it's friendly towards autistic children, even if you don't know who is autistic in your class, that would help so much. I was diagnosed way past out of high school. So all of that could have helped me because I was struggling so hard. I reached out to specific teachers who were able to give informal accommodations. I passed 100% in those classes. The other teachers who refused to do it, I actually failed. So that's really important if you think about your classroom design on a larger scale, not just accommodating one person, but accommodating all students of all types. Second piece of advice I would give is to focus on non-autistic peers. Bullying is such a big problem, and that only happens if you focus on the other kids. Again, not focusing on just the one autistic kid. If you teach acceptance, you can do it by focusing on the classroom itself and focusing on non-autistic people. I'd be interested to see interventions aimed only at non-autistic people. That'd be interesting to see.
Just speaking from my own experience, being that very quiet child that didn't want to be noticed at all in the classroom and wouldn't say anything if anything was bothering me, and would just shut down instead of reaching out to the teacher. For the teacher, when you see that child not responding to anything, either reach out to them individually or take like a school counselor or whatever if they don't feel equipped to do that, and just have someone reach out to the child. Just ask what's going on, or is something troubling you? What can we do to help? Just that kind of thing.
And I wanted to say thank you for your talk. It really inspired me seeing all that dual exceptionality. I'm actually a PhD student at the U of A, an autism researcher and an individual on the spectrum. And my question was mainly going to be, like, you people on the spectrum, and sort of, even though I'm on the spectrum, I'm somewhat in the ivory tower and somewhat separated from the community. And I'm wondering, like, what to consider while respecting the autism community while conducting research. My undergraduate study was on sexuality and autism, and I looked at differences in sexual orientation, and based on the extreme male brain theory of autism, and it ended up getting some backlash on the net where some people in the community were offended by it, not realizing I was also on the spectrum. So for this project, I'm looking a little bit more at a children's book that focuses on autism culture, but I'm sort of wondering feedback from the community on that about doing research without being intrusive or stepping on people's toes or upsetting people.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're wondering how to be part of that research process without stepping on toes. Is that?
Yes, to be an ethical researcher and not pick a topic that's going to offend somebody or misinterpret it, or misinterpret a minority group, because sometimes as a person on the spectrum, I recognize I only represent one person's point of view and that the whole community is very different. Mm-hmm. And like as she mentioned, the suspicion of people in the community of researchers and not wanting to put people as circus animals.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick thing. Pretty much everything you do, people are going to get offended by. So, like, I think you're doing a really cool thing, and they shouldn't get super offended if you ask a question, because you're really just trying to advance research, and don't even think about it. Just chill.
I would say be respectful, and if you are talking to individual people and doing your research, ask them beforehand, what are you okay with me saying and what are you okay with me not saying? If someone is confiding to you about their sex life, do they actually want you to put that in your paper, or are they okay with you putting it in your paper as long as they are anonymous? Be respectful of people's privacy and ask them specifically what are they okay with sharing.
Okay. Get autistic people as collaborators from the very beginning. From the very beginning. You don't want to wait for the backlash afterwards. Get them involved. We're interested in having more research that is representative of us. We want to be included. So, nothing about us without us, right? So I would say try to get an autistic consultant, try to get an autistic researcher that is also involved in the self-advocate community. I think that there was a piece of research done with the president of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, Julia Bascom, that was looking at executive functioning in women and girls. And I thought that was an amazing piece of research because I saw my experiences reflected back to me in the research, and I saw ways that could help me that were meaningful and practical. So get them involved in the very beginning, get us involved in the very beginning, and pay them for the work, because that is labor that the marginalized are doing. I also want to give props to you as an autistic researcher. That's really, really cool. I can't say I'm proud of you, but I guess I am proud of you. It's like, yes, go for it.
I avoid it whenever possible, and if somebody is being ableist, I tell them stop being ableist. And if they don't know what that means, I explain it to them. I say, no, what you are, don't share videos of deaf person hears for the first time, because that should be a very personal moment for them. Or don't say this person is inspiring just because they're disabled. If they accomplish something really cool, then say, hey, that's great, that's inspiring that they accomplished something really cool. Not, oh, this person is inspiring because they're disabled and they have a job.
Finding that support group is so important. I'm actually accessing emotional support right now during my breaks. We have a Slack channel with CAU that is literally vent and support. So finding autistic people or other disabled people that understand your experiences, reaching out to them. We call it sharing spoons. If you're familiar with spoon theory, it's an analogy for energy. And when we have extra spoons, we can support each other. So finding, again, your community, getting that support, asking for help. Ableism is pervasive. It's hard to deal with. It's systematic. It's really terrible, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. But how I deal with it is accessing my support group, and also it's also a reason why I became an advocate. I like to see that I'm making some change. So if you are someone who is a change maker and focusing on those efforts, I take some gratitude or gratefulness for at least seeing some change in the positive direction, so I don't focus on all the negatives that's still surrounding me. And it could be a small change. It could be like educating a friend or something like that, right? It doesn't have to be starting a big, huge organization and wondering if it's going to work or not.
So another question brought forward, without getting into debates about inclusion or kind of broader concepts, how do you as panelists feel that as children you would have done better in an alternative environment like homeschool or a school delivering the same curricular in a manner that was matched to your learning styles? And I guess in combination with that, do you think you would have done better? And then advice for parents who are making those decisions for their children now.
For me, I feel like at the time in elementary school, middle school, high school, I would have felt better and it would have been a lot easier and maybe I would have had lots of friends. But now as an adult, I feel like I've been given lots of the skills just by because if I didn't get invited to a birthday party and I'd be like, why didn't I get invited? My mom would be like, it's because you act like you're crazy. You run around like you're wild. And I'm like, aw. And so then even though I wanted to, I kind of be like, yo, if I calm down a little bit, maybe I'll get invited to the next birthday party. And so just through trial and error, I feel like I became an adult. Being in that situation might have been hard, but I feel like coming out of it, at least for me, was a success.
Were you going to say?
Fortunately, growing up, I experienced, 3 different types of schooling. When I was kindergarten to grade 6, I was in a very small school, 180-ish kids from K to 9, because it was in a rural community. And so I was able to have very individualized attention from the teachers. Unfortunately, socially, I did not do so well. So I went into cyberschooling, which is basically homeschooling, but over a computer. And I was very, very isolated. I became more depressed, I would say, and lost any friend opportunities that I might have had. Even though it was the right choice academically, I flourished there. Socially, when I went back into the public school system in grade 9 into a larger school, I was so overwhelmed. That was probably the worst school year of my life. Just the anxiety and not having the skills to deal with the other children. So even though it's exceptionally hard, you do need to be forced into those social situations. Just have the support group there to deal with it, especially at home. When you put on this fake face for school all day, you should just be able to come home and just be in a terrible mood, not want to talk to anyone, just want to punch your pillow 1,000 times and have your parents just go, yeah, that's okay. That's what's best, in my opinion.
I was in school in the 1970s when very few people had even heard of autism and hadn't heard of many learning disabilities, and dyslexia was considered to be a fad. I don't have dyslexia, but I did when I actually went through the education faculty at the University of Victoria, where one of the teachers that was training future teachers said that dyslexia and learning disabilities were a fad and didn't really exist. I think for me personally, I would have done better in something like a Montessori program where everybody goes at their own pace, because I far outstripped many of my classmates in English and verbal and written subjects, but was very far behind in math and science, because I later found out I have nonverbal learning disability. If there was a way that I was bored for a lot of the time. I was in school and I was playing with toys, and I was fidgeting, and I was drawing pictures in my notebook while everybody else was struggling to get through chapter 1. I was on chapter 26. But at the same time, I was really, really far behind in math. So if there was any way that I could have had advanced reading subjects in English and a slower pace of learning for math, would have been very, very, very helpful for me.
One more question. Are any of the panelists in relationships with autistic folks? And if so, how do you balance your needs with the needs of your partner?
This is an amazing question, thank you. I think a lot of autistic people do end up in relationships with neurodivergent people. It doesn't have to be autistic people. Closer. Okay, a lot of people that are autistic end up in relationships with other neurodivergent people. It doesn't have to be autism, but like ADHD or similar, or like mentally ill folks. So the question being, how do you manage both of your partner's needs? And I think it's like very generic relationship advice is to communicate, right? And to treat each other with respect, to take time for each other and for yourself, to give space. So my partner is also neurodivergent. I don't want to disclose any personal details, but how we do it is we talk to each other, and we start from that relationship like basis of understanding and respect. We apologize. And in some cases, if we hurt each other, and that's possible, like in all cases with relationships, we try to work it out. So and communication is so hard. Communication is especially hard for folks with autism. So some strategies or relationship advice that's given out, like relationship columns, they don't work for us. So working on autistic-specific communication strategies are really good. There's this one website that really helped me when I started getting into relationships, and that was realsocialskills.org. It is run by an autistic person, and it taught me so much about the neurotypical world, and it taught me a lot about how to just manage social relationships in general, especially romantic ones or friendships. So finding out your own communication style and working with it, and then working with your partner's communication styles, and checking in, like what are your access needs, asking how they're doing. I can't really think of more, but it is really, it works on a foundation level the same way as with any relationship, but you have to be careful about, okay, we do communicate differently, we do act in a different way, so how do we accommodate that as well?
I was just going to say, just listening to this incredible group of women who have achieved so much, and despite those challenges, right? I mean, we hear about all the individual differences and what might have made it some of those younger experiences better, or the right thing to do, or how to feel successful. But I think what we keep hearing is that finding support with other people, either it's other people who are autistic, other people who have a similar interest than you, but having that support system is one of the themes, I think, that I hear as far as the most helpful.